guys, so I am back with my chunky yarn again and my 6mm hook, and we are going to be learning single crochet today. Yay! So there, like I'm reminding you to check the back of your yarn to see what size hook you will need. Mine says 6mm, and that's what we are gonna go with, and it's in this lovely copper color by Starcraft Yarns. This video isn't sponsored, but I just love this color. Okay, so I'm jumping right into making my slip knot. You'll know that this is important for any piece of crochet, and if you need a more detailed slow down version of how to do this, there is a video up on my channel now, so check that out. So the next thing I'm going to move on to is showing you the back of the label. Most crochet, or most yarns actually, have a little square like this that looks like a grid, and what this means is 14 stitches across and 20 rows high should equal a 4x4 inch square if you're using a 6mm hook. Now wait till the end to see whether or not my own square is the recommended size or not. So I'm moving into doing the foundation chain. Again, there is a video up on my channel. It's actually a slip knot and foundation chain video all in one. So if you check that out, you will see both techniques in that video. I'm going to do a chain of about 14 stitches before moving on to actually making this square in single crochet. Okay, so I have got my 14 stitches, but make sure you double check that that is what you have, so do count them. The one on your hook does not count as a stitch. So because I've got 14 stitches and I need to turn my work to come back in the other direction, I would chain one. So like you can see, the stitches look pretty even, so I'm happy with what I've come up with. I wouldn't redo my foundation chain at this stage, but I would put a stitch marker in so I know where my first stitch is. So if you are a beginner and you may not remember to count on your way back, then just pop a stitch marker in so you know which is your last stitch. So I will chain one, and that is literally just like the foundation chain, just chaining another one. So in essence, you have 15 stitches. But when you work back in the other direction, you do not go back into that first stitch, you go back into the second stitch away from your hook. So whenever you read a pattern, it will normally say in the second stitch from your hook, and that is what it means. It means do not go into that first stitch, go into the second stitch. So in terms of single crochet, I'm just going to pull my yarn because it's actually getting on my nerves. It's in the way, and I need more yarn, so I'm just going to pull that out. So yeah, skip the first stitch, and the second stitch, you push your hook into that gap. Okay, you push it in. There you go. You yarn over. So this is yarning over and pulling the yarn back through. You yarn over again and you pull through the 2 loops on your hook. So let's do that again. What we're going to do is we're going to pop a stitch marker in so you know that that is your first stitch. If you are a beginner, I would highly suggest you do this because it is so easy to miss stitches because you're not sure which stitch is your first or your last stitch. So just pop a stitch marker in. This is one of the clip-in ones that will not move. So there we go. And then hold your yarn, and we're going to go into the next stitch, which is there. Push your hook through, yarn over, pull through, and pull through both chains on your hook. Again, we're going to go in, and I've zoomed in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. We're going to push that through. We're going to yarn over and pull through, and we're going to yarn over and pull through. Okay, be sure to slow down the video if this is too fast for you. There is that function on YouTube, so definitely use that. So again, push through, pull up a loop. You've got 2 loops on your hook, and you now yarn over and pull through those 2. So meet me back at the end when you have 1 stitch left, and here we are. We've got 1 stitch left on the hook. That's the one you put your stitch marker in, and I'm just going to show you how to finish off the row and turn your work. So you just put the hook through that stitch, and I would take the stitch marker out at this point, and then we yarn over, we pull up a loop, and then we yarn over again and pull through both loops on our hook. And there we go. And now you can just go across and count that you have 14 stitches. And what happens when you start to miss stitches is that your work does not have a tidy finish because it starts to change size as the rows go along. So you just want to make sure you have 14. So go along and count, like you can see I'm doing, and count each one of those stitches and make sure you have 14. Great. Okay, so now to turn our work, and because now we need to work back in the opposite direction. I'm just showing you the top of the work as well. As you can see, there are loads of like V's. So sometimes people will describe them as V's, so you can see what they look like from the top. Okay, so now to turn the work, we need to chain 1 before we turn, just to give the edge a super neat finish, and come back in the other direction. So when it comes to chaining, it's as if you were doing a foundation chain. So you just yarn over and pull up a loop. There we go, and that's your chain 1. You can turn it either way. So you can turn left to right or right to left, but whichever way you do decide to turn it, just be consistent with it. So if you turn one way, continue to turn one way. If you turn, for example, in the other opposite direction, so if you turn towards your left, then just make sure you turn that way all the time, because you'll eventually see that the neatness of the edges start to be compromised if you start turning in different ways. Okay, so we've chained 1 and we're now going to work back in the opposite direction. Okay, so we skipped the first chain from the hook because that was our chain 1, and we're going to go into the last stitch we made in the last row. So this is the second chain from the hook now, and we're going to go into both the front loop and the back loop. If you just go into the front loop only, that is front loop single crochet. If you go into the back loop only, that is back loop single crochet, but we are going to just be doing standard single crochet, which means we're going into both the front and back loop. So skip a stitch and then put your hook through both the front and back loop of that next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop on your hook. You've got 2 loops on your hook now, and you yarn over and pull through both of those. There we go. And you pull that up. Pop your stitch marker back in just so you know which is the first stitch you've done for this row. So here you go. I'm using the open-ended one. You can use the clip one. It's up to you. And the link for the stitch markers I have is in my very first video, which is the 7 tools I think every crochet beginner needs. And it's really affordable tools as well that you can get from Amazon and most craft shops as well. So for the next stitch, we're going into the front and back loop again. So put through your hook through the loop, not just the front loop. Like I said, that would be front loop only single crochet. So we need it to go through both. So put through both, and we now are going to yarn over, pull up a loop. You've got 2 loops, and pull through both of those loops. Okay, so the next one, put your hook through the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook. Okay. So again, we do the same. And we're going to put our hook through the next stitch. We're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. And we're going to yarn over again and pull up a loop. So continue doing that and meet me back at the end with 2 stitches left to go. Okay, so push your hook through the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook. And again, push your hook through the last stitch, take your stitch marker out, yarn over, and just make sure you've gone through both the stitches on your last stitch, so both the front and the back loop, only because it's so easy on the last stitch to only go through the front loop. Sometimes it's just not clear if you've gone through both. So just make sure you've done that when you're yarning over and pulling through, and then you yarn over and pull through both loops on your hook. And that's another row completed. Just going to do the turning again with you. So you chain one, and you can chain at different times. So you can chain before turning, you can turn and then chain. It's up to you, it doesn't matter. So I chain before turning, but some people prefer to chain after. So turn and then chain. It literally does not make a difference how you do it. Just try and be consistent. Consistency is always great, but if you aren't consistent in when you chain, it's fine. So in that last stitch that we did from the previous row, we're going to go into that one. So remember, we do not go into the chain one, we go into the stitch. So we yarn over, and then we pull through, and then we yarn over and pull through both loops on the hook. So go through the stitch with your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through both loops. Now, as a beginner, remember to put your stitch marker back in. I was almost getting carried away, but that's because I've been doing this for years, so I know where all my stitches are. But I would say practice makes perfect, and that's great if you want to not use stitch markers and learn that way. But just be mindful that you will need to count your stitches after every row just to be on the safe side. So push your hook through the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both loops on your hook. That is single crochet, okay? And I'm going to show you what it looks like from both the back and the front. So the stitches are looking super neat at the moment. So yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through both stitches. And meet me back at the end. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a couple more rows, and then I will meet you back. So I've done a few more rows here, and now we're just going to measure it to see how wide and how long it is. Just zooming in so you can see better. You can see the stitches clearly, they're clearly defined. Looks cutie. So yes, so my piece of work with the 14 stitches is over the 4 inches that was recommended behind the label. So the label was telling you what the gauge should be, and patterns will usually tell you that as well. So because mine is just over 4.5 inches, what I would then do is look at using a bigger hook size. So still doing 14 stitches across, but using either a, not a bigger hook, a smaller hook. So I would use a 5.5mm hook or a 5mm hook. Still do 14 stitches across, and it should hopefully mean that the piece of work would then be like the right size and match the gauge. So it should then come to about 4 inches. So what you can do is, if you do swatch a piece of work and do try and make a practice swatch before going into a full project, and you find that your project is working up bigger, then try sizing down a hook size, still doing the same amount of recommended stitches, but going down a hook size should shrink the work. If your work is too small, then try and size up by 0.5 inches or a full inch millimeter, gosh, 0.5 millimeters or a full millimeter in terms of hook size. Okay, so yeah, that's it for today, guys. As you can see, I have lovely edges there, but what we'll do is we'll meet back next time and we will look at doing double crochet and half double crochet. Take care, bye.